What's up, humans, and welcome back to the Human Music Podcast. This is episode 52, Ill.Gates Tells Crazy DJ Stories. It's our 1 year anniversary of the podcast, and we're celebrating with our mentor, the one and only ill.Gates. He's a successful producer who has DJed at shows and festivals around the world. He also followed his passion for education and launching other producers' careers by founding the Producer Dojo, where all of our hosts studied music production and are currently on staff coaching the next generation of producers. Listen in on part 1 of our conversation as ill.Gates tells crazy stories from starting to DJ in high school, raving before cell phones, getting his first record deal as the Phat Conductor, and how his first Burning Man experience changed his life. He also tells a story we're calling Frank's Lemons, which is hands down the craziest story that has ever been told on this show. Before we get into it, please support our sponsors. Links down below. First off, Dojo TV. Free producer live stream classes from the Producer Dojo senseis and where we recorded this podcast. Next, the weekly download, where you can learn from ill.Gates himself in his private weekly group lessons and get access to over 220 more episodes in the archive for only $20 per month. It is insane. I have learned so many of the absolute essential skills I know as a producer from the weekly download. Next, guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute, who is the best engineer we know. Your first class is free, and you can learn some amazing, super high-level mixing and mastering tips from Seth Drake. Finally, Gangaroo Records music distribution, where you can get unlimited uploads for under $10, because once you've got your music sounding great, well, then you'll need to get it out to the people, right? Get your tunes to all the goons with Gangaroo. All right, without further ado, let's get into the episode.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesco with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. What's up, humans? What's up, ninjas? Human Music Podcast back live on Dojo TV. You know us. I'm Luke Rain. Over here we got my guy Rip Kenny, and of course, down in that corner down there, it's hard for me to do that with my thumb, apparently. We got Tesco, but the most exciting thing, we got the man himself, the dojo sensei of all the dojo senseis, ill.Gates, right here, guys.
How's it going?
Oh my God.
It's going good. What's up, chat? Hope you guys are all as stoked as we are for this interview. We got ill.Gates. This is our 1 year of the podcast wrap up, episode 52. We made it a full year, guys. And to celebrate, we just had to have the best guest. We got to get ill.Gates on here. We know it's going to be super educational, super fun. And, we got a whole lot to talk about. So let's get right on into it and let you start us off with however you feel like telling your superhero origin story today.
All right, word up. So, what's going on out there in Listenerville? Hello in the chat. How's everybody doing? Hope you're feeling good. Spring has sprung. The grass is riz. COVID is slowly waning. Some places more quickly than others. But summer is on the horizon, as are festivities, and I'm getting really excited. I'm hoping to get vaccinated in time for Burning Man. That's my current wish. It's top of my Christmas list. So as soon as I get that second jab, I'm gonna try and get Burning Man tickets.
Amen.
I'd see how to start this story. Okay, so when I was really, really young, my folks got me a little battery-powered Casio ConcertMate 800, and it had little lights on it, that one light for each key, and you could get ROM cards. Put them in, it would teach you jingle bells and stuff. I wasn't much into learning jingle bells. I was like, It's just isn't that fun. Lots of people have played the piano. I don't know if the piano is me. But then I found out that you could sample pots and pans and things with these 4 little pads on it. And I started sampling farts and playing them with my friends because it was battery powered and I could sneak up behind them and play the farts, which I thought was the greatest thing ever in my 7-year-old life. And so I became interested in electronics, and electronic music and sampling specifically. And then I kind of like, I'd played piano and stuff when I was a kid, but I was never really that into it. In retrospect, I wish I had paid more attention in piano because I find myself entering nearly all of my melodies on the piano. So I'm currently doing melodics and trying to make up for lost time, and that's been good. But yeah, so piano wasn't punk enough for me. So when I was in high school, I started an industrial band, and I built my own bass guitar with my dad, because he's a full-time musician, and he also is really good at building things. He'd fix and repair all of his own equipment and everything.
What was this band called?
He's in lots of bands. His name is Vince Halfhide. He's primarily like a session guitarist and live player. He is often like a hired gun because like, let's say you're one of those bands where the band is just the name of the front person. Those bands, you don't bring the whole band every time. A lot of the time you show up in a town and you need a local rhythm guitarist, or you need a local drummer. And, so my dad was always the guy so he got to play with like, Buddy Guy and like a bunch of other fairly established people. But the most well-known band he's in that is still kind of touring and active is the Mighty Popo, and they do African music, which is pretty cool. And then he was also in a reggae band called Ragamuffin that were pretty famous. And then he predominantly plays blues himself. But
what about the industrial band you were in? What was that called?
I was in a horrible industrial band called Necrotizing Fasciitis, named after the flesh-eating disease. And we played really, really terrible gigs, and we didn't have a drummer. So I just got my old Roland 606 drum machine and put it through a guitar pedal so it was really distorted, and then put it through a guitar amp so it was even more distorted. And we just had like really, really distorted drum machine beats, and then just like yelling, like more distorted yelling, and then lots of guitar and bass. And we would invite people from the audience to come up on stage and scream as well. So needless to say that the shows were fucking terrible and nobody liked it. So
this sounds amazing though. Like this sounds like fun. Modern. This sounds like modern hyperpop, honestly.
Right. Yeah, it was fun. And it was very, we were fresh out of F-bombs to give. Can you drop F-bombs on this podcast? Is it that kind of podcast?
Fuck no.
Okay, cool. But yeah, so we were fresh out of fucks to give, and it was a good time, but didn't really go very far. And then I remember when I was, I think I was like, it was 13 or 14. It was the summer before grade 9, so I would have been, I guess, just turning 14. My best friend growing up when I was in Toronto, it was Brandon Cronenberg, who actually just directed a pretty awesome film named Possessor, which is...
I hear it's gory.
It's gory as fuck, and it's amazing. It's so good. But anyway, his dad was David Cronenberg, the famous film director, and after my family had moved out of Toronto, I would go back to visit Brandon because he was like my childhood best friend, right? So I'd go back to visit him, and he was a little older than me, so he got into psychedelics a little earlier than me, and was like, "Hey, we're gonna take acid and go to a rave." And we did, and it was great. It was like one of those big, like 10,000 person 90s raves that they used to have in Toronto. And it was a lot of techno and stuff. And I think it was like they had some big cheesy headliner like John Digweed or Sasha or something. And I was like, yo, this is so fun. And I remember like peaking on acid, wearing this like burnt lab coat, walking around, and I ran into Wesley Snipes, and I was like not sure if I was hallucinating that it was Wesley Snipes or not, and I went to like lifted up my finger, just obviously tripping balls, and I was like, And then this big hand comes on my shoulder and I hear, leave Mr. Snipes alone, please. And I was like, oh shit, it was him. Well, I got my question answered. But what would I have said to him? I was like, ripped
some
on
riddle
acid.
he couldn't answer. Some
I
riddle
like
that he
passenger 57.
Yeah, it was. I think this was around like Demolition Man and some era like that. Yeah, before the tax trouble. But yeah, so I remember just loving it, and I was a child actor. I was in some cartoons and stuff. Probably the one that's still around is called Happy Birthday Bunnykins, and it was based on the China with rabbits on it that you've seen probably from England, and there's little rabbits chasing each other around the China. So the company that makes this, Royal Doulton, decided that they should make a children's cartoon for the Canadian audiences that would make Canadian children bother their parents to buy this fucking rabbit China. So brilliant. You can imagine how effective a marketing technique that was. But anyway, so in the cartoon, I was the bad bunny, and it was my job to harass and bully the main character. And you can see it on YouTube to this day. Happy Birthday Bunnykins. It's got my voice before my voice had changed, because I hit puberty pretty late. So it was I think it was maybe 14 and a half, 15 before my voice changed. So I had a little tiny voice. Anyway, so I very quickly sussed out that the acting world was filled with insincerity or pedophiles. And I remember really being like, yo, was that old guy hitting on me in our audition? That was a little weird. And then, I've since learned that yes, probably he was. But yeah, so I decided acting wasn't for me. And I took my money that I made from acting and bought a set of turntables right away. Because especially in the 90s, computers were not really affordable. There was not if you wanted I got an MPC later. I'll tell you that part later. But computers were not really affordable, and unless you had a mountain of analog hardware, you were not playing live on it. And really, the only way to play live on a budget was DJing. So. So I started collecting all different kinds of records. And I figured minimal techno would be the easiest to learn on because the beats were the simplest. But I knew I wasn't going to be a techno DJ. I just liked techno and figured that, having a genre that doesn't have a lot of vocals and stuff that you got to mix around was good, for starting out. But then, I was really into breakcore and hardcore and gabber and things, and then I was also really into rap music, especially it was a great time for hip hop. The mid to late 90s was it was just a really good time for hip hop. Yeah. So I would always listen to Square Pusher and Aphex Twin and Merzbow and stuff, and then also I listened to Wu-Tang Clan and De La Soul and A Tribe Called Quest and stuff like that. And I was like, oh classics. Man, only there was a way to fuse hip hop and industrial experimental electronic music, and that was kind of always my thing. So then I DJ'd throughout high school, but as a hobby, because I got streamed out of public education and put into art school pretty quick, because I was just never paying attention in class and I was drawing all the time and stuff. So rather than being your child needs Adderall, the Canadian education system was maybe you should focus on art. It's awesome. So I ended up I got to try out for this art school, and I got in, and it was basically that old TV show from the 70s, Fame, where they have a high school where people take different arts. It was one of those high schools. It's got that disco song Fame, I wanna live forever. It's you know the sample. You've heard people sample it. It's in lots of rap songs. But yeah, that was the theme song from a cartoon about a high school, much like the one that I went to. So while I was studying art, I would, go out raving on the weekend, and somehow in Ottawa things were so lax that I was able to start DJing in clubs at age 15. And And there was Ottawa is like right on this border of Quebec, which is, you know, the French province in Canada. Ottawa's right on the border, and there's this river, the Saint Laurent River, that runs in from the Atlantic Ocean through Quebec and through Ottawa, dividing Ontario from Quebec. So Ottawa is like right on the border. And if you cross a bridge that's like right in downtown, it's not hard to get to, you are suddenly in Quebec, which is a different province with a different drinking age and entirely different laws. And they just don't give a fuck. So as long as you look like you're not like shitting yourself and wearing diapers, you can just go to a bar or club. Like it was, I'm sure it's more strict now, but I remember all through high school, like no problem getting into bars and clubs. It was awesome. So I started like playing what gigs I could, and I ended up actually getting like pretty embraced by because like I've dressed really weird. I did not look like your average raver, you know. I was like a weird looking person, and like I was really into like, you know, punk rock and like dyeing my hair weird, and just like, you know, at one point I was like carrying around a rubber severed hand, like everywhere I go and stuff. And I also like
you do.
Yeah, as you do. And I was really into like, you know, like doing weird social experiments and stuff. Like I remember I brought a head shaver to school, at high school, and I shaved like 5 people's heads and put the hair in like an envelope and wrote "Open Me" on it. And then we just left it for people to run to see it. And we were just like sitting there eating our lunch, watching person after person open this thing and then just lose their fucking minds. And I was like, no, this is art right now, guys. This is art. Yeah, it was great. It was a good time. But yeah, so it's really into like pranking people and just kind of like just provoking people a little bit and fucking with them. Because I had this t-shirt that said jerk on it, right? And I thought it was really funny to like label yourself a jerk, you know? And wearing this t-shirt around and just seeing the reactions that people would have, and just like people would always feel the need to like say something to you, or like they either loved it or they didn't like it or whatever. And I was just like, wow, it's so awesome that fashion can just like provoke such a reaction from people, and you can find out what people are all about in a very different way than if you're just like, you know, all following the rules of polite society and like, you know, introducing each other, and you still got the mask on. So I was like, wow, fashion has the ability to like get people to drop the mask. I'm like, this is interesting, you know? So it's always seeking out ways to kind of shake things up and just see what people are really about. Cause like, and you know, when you like dress weird, you have like weird hair or whatever, it's kind of like you're putting a flag up, and people will show their true colors. And I would rather find out someone is an asshole right away if they're an asshole, because it really sucks to spend any amount of time developing a relationship with a person, and then you're like having a beer and they're like, hey, so I'm not a racist, but, and then say the most racist shit ever. No one's ever like, I'm not a racist, but I could really go for a sandwich right now. You know,
I'm not a racist, but I agree with the words of Dr. Martin Luther King. Yeah, nobody says that.
No, it's only racist things that come after it. So I found that when I would, you know, push people's buttons a little, it would help me to know who was worth investing time in a friendship with, or so my theory went at the time. I might have also just been a fucking annoying punk kid. I don't know. It was one really of the
You're taking your bad rabbit role way too seriously, man.
Yeah. So anyway, it was fun, and but I didn't really fit in even in the like rave scene, because everybody was like, they were all into like house music or techno or trance, or else like drum and bass and meth, you know? And those scenes were just like, I was just not into those scenes. I knew I was into electronic music and I saw the potential of it and stuff. And like, and I'd be sitting there listening to like Luke V. Bear or something, or like, you know, Portishead. And I'd be like, why don't I hear shit like this at parties? Like, I would way rather party to this than, you know, Unts and the Boots and Cats, you know? It's just like, there's only so much of that shit you can handle. You line those kick drums up like marching Nazis, you know? It's just so boring. So boring. But I have since grown to love some techno and house, and I actually, especially after becoming a modular person, I realized that techno is just what modular wants to do, So I've learned to embrace it a bit more and not be such a music racist. But I was a bit of a music racist back then. Didn't like the uns. So I ended up making friends with some promoters who were in the gay scene and ended up DJing in gay bars. And I came up like DJing in gay bars when I was like 15, 16 and shit, like before I was getting into like the proper club scene or really even like getting booked at raves. I was getting booked at gay bars and they were down with me playing some pretty experimental shit. And nobody ever made me feel uncomfortable. Nobody ever like hit on me. They made sure not to let me drink. Everybody paid me on time. All the people were really nice. And I was like, wow, I see why they're called gay. Like this is a good time. This is fun, And yeah, nobody even ever asked me if I was gay or anything. Like it was just like they just understood I was a kid. It was inappropriate to behave that way, and everybody was super cool the whole time. So I always had a big soft spot for gay people ever since. And I've met gay family members and stuff, and lots of gay friends. But I've always and I've always been really like just into fucking being my weird self and being kind of punk about it. So along the way, I was like, DJing on this radio show called The Gray Border, where I had a friend who was in senior year, Josh Beyer, and he has since become like an actor and songwriter and writer and now a famous artist. He's got art in Walmart and shit. Like it's crazy. He can do whatever. He just picks a thing and does it. But when he was like 19 and I was 14, he gave me the tap to be the musical coordinator on his paranormal call-in show, The Gray Border. So I would get to like play punk rock records or like, I was really into like Atari Teenage Riot and stuff like that. They're kind of like precursors to Death Grips, like really, old school like anarchist rave techno, basically. Yeah, so I would play stuff on there, and we had like this call-in show, and man, it was like you could never do it now. Like like the things that people would say on the air were so insane. And and then we would meet like fans, and they would like people who call into paranormal radio show fans. Those are some fucking weirdos. Like they are really, really weird. Like because I grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons and hung out with like 30-year-old Dungeons and Dragons dudes when I was like 12. They were pretty weird, but not half as fucking weird as the fans that we had on The Great Border. Like and Josh, because he was the host, he got it the worst. Like they would somehow get his phone number or whatever. Like he stupidly made the mistake of having a UFO hunting meeting where all the fans we just like met in this field and stuff, and he stupidly gave out his phone number to this girl who we called Vampire Girl because she was always calling in and telling us stories about her nightly visits from a vampire. And she would just call Josh up and be like, yeah, I was going to kill myself, but thought I'd give you a shout first. What do you think? And he'd have to like sit there talking to her. And like, this is back in the landline days. So he'd be like writing like, Mom, call the police, and shit, like just trying to figure it out. So our high school was pretty weird. It was a pretty weird time in high school.
What kind of music do you play on that?
I play everything. Like I collected a lot of like band vinyl too, and like punk rock, noise music, like pretty much like anything and everything. Like and I still listen to a way wider variety of music than I produce, like way wider, and like there are times that like there's this band that I really love called Konono Number One. They're from Africa, and they play like it's like a thumb piano band, and they just have thumb pianos with pickups in them, and they're like really loud, distorted thumb piano. It's so fucking cool, and it just like it's all out of tune and like just like weird ass rhythms and this like crazy. Yeah, it's just like. It's just so different, and I think it's important to listen to like a really wide variety of music, especially if you're a music maker, because it helps you to train your ear to hear things differently, and when like, because like when you're working on music, it's like the sounds that are there are kind of a question, and then your imagination will just fill in an answer for you, and it'll feel like it came from the ether, and like you just like came up with this magical thing that you channeled from somewhere else, but it's totally just a product from your neurons of like all the music that you've listened to before, and like what kinds of listening challenges you have and stuff, like, unless you're like doing like automatic writing type thing and then just editing after. It's like, it's all like, if you're hearing it in your head first, it's because you're essentially, it's like the average of all the things that you thought would match or whatever, yeah, exactly.
In brain synthesis.
Totally. So I think it's important to really challenge yourself and listen to like really wide varieties of music. So yeah, I played anything and everything, and then we'd of course play like theremin songs and stuff because it was like a paranormal show, so you needed to have theremin records. But yeah, it was a good time. So I had like experience DJing lots of different places, but not raves yet. And none of the rave promoters wanted to let me in because they were like, this kid's a fucking weirdo. He's always on acid, dressed wearing goggles and like lab coats and shit. And just like, I don't know what the fuck his deal is. Like, I don't know what's going on with this kid. So then eventually I met these guys who would become my crew, and they were a breakdance and graffiti crew. The one guy just he's living in LA right now. If you go I am Rick or true TRUXOXO _ on Instagram, he's actually become a fairly famous tattoo artist in Los Angeles. But he's he does like anime mashup tattoos and stuff that are pretty cool. But he's also a really, really talented artist, and a lot of the art in my house that you see is his work. This tattoo is his work. And then my other friend Mike Tessier was also he did a lot of like street inspired artwork, and we had a breakdance crew. And I was the DJ, and they were the dancers, and then we also did like graffiti and whatnot. And my best friend Devin from high school, he was really into building sets, and he would it started with him doing all of the sets for the school play, but then as a spin-off from this school play, there was this like psychedelic clown troupe that started as like a spin-off, and they had commissioned Devin to build this like giant set that took up an entire city park, like a block, and it was called the History Making Machine. And there was this we had to build a giant machine that would eat people and spit out history as enacted by bizarre psychedelic clowns. So that was a good time. And Mike and Alex and the breakdance crew, we ended up working with them originally in that capacity, where they were like set painters for us. But we ended up becoming pretty good friends. And the next thing you know, we're all in this breakdance crew, and we ended up getting hired by some rave promoters to art up their parties. And I was like, okay, so we'll do that, but I'm not going there if I'm not playing. And that was when I started getting time slots. I basically held my artist friends ransom for time slots.
Leverage.
Yeah. So because like, rave promoters or any kind of promoters, like they got a million people beating their door down with demos, and like, especially if you don't have like fans with tattoos of your logo on them yet, it's like, why are they going to put you on and not one of their friends? Are you selling tickets? Their friends are probably selling tickets. Are you going to sell tickets? It's like, it's not about how good you are. And see, my deluded ass, I thought that if I just practiced and got really good, that they'd have to book me because I was better than other people. Holy crap! What a naive way to look at music. That was dumb. But yeah, it was really when I got the leverage of our art crew that things started to work out. And then the next thing you know, we were doing festivals or raves or whatever, like every week or two. And
it really goes to show, though, like, if you want to get into a scene or into, somebody's good graces or whatever, and instead of just saying like, what can you do for me, look like, okay, step back, what do they actually need? How can I provide value outside of what I want to get out of this relationship?
Totally. It's like the whole, how do you get into like one of those studios that are like a closed shop? Well, you go there and you ask if you can help for free, and you make them like you, and it's like, it's the same thing. And it's the same thing with like artist managers too. Like if you are out there and you want to like, you want to get a good manager, if you just walk up to them and you're like, hey, here's my fucking resume, like put me on your management company, they're going to be like, oh, get in line, like whatever. Right. But if you're like, hey, I want to learn, how about I help you and you teach me stuff, that will open all the doors. That will open all the doors. And especially now with everybody being stay-at-home DJs, you need to, all these management companies, they don't have ticket money coming in. So most of them that are still going, it's like they either have, some kind of like licensing thing or maybe educational thing, or else they have a benefactor or a Patreon or, because it's not shows. So, and I mean, that's the big cash cow of the music scene is shows. And with that gone, it's like you've seen so many people drop off. Like there's labels that haven't had a single release since coronavirus started. Like there's a lot of people that just dropped off because you can't, it's not a charity, So the time is very fucking ripe for you to go, hey, I want to be like artist X. Let's Google who their manager is. And then you go to their manager and you offer to help for free in exchange for knowledge. Don't even mention that you DJ at first. Don't even mention that you have a musical project at first. Work until they like you enough to ask you. And then when you tell them, they'll be like, hey, I can help you with that.
Yeah, that's such an underrated tip. Like everyone gets that so backwards. Like when you are trying to cultivate a relationship with someone, you're not asking them for a bunch of stuff right up front. You're becoming friends with them first. And for some reason in the music industry, when you're trying to make a name for yourself, your instinct is, I like this person can provide this for me, and I just want to skip to that. When like every relationship built ever is based on friendship first, and you can't just skip right to like doing favors for you when they don't even know you.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like you get to the point where you're just like, you just roll your eyes and you're just like, get in line. I don't care anymore.
Yeah.
And like any promoter who's good has been at that point for years. So, yeah. And any manager too, same thing, agency, like you don't just walk up and be like, hi, here's what you're going to do for me. They're like, get the fuck out of here. So you need to have some kind of leverage or do something to get your foot in the door. And for me, it was, my art and party deco crew. So next thing you know, we're doing all these parties and like building fucking robots and like doing graffiti murals. And like I came up with this genius party decoration where you take like cardboard boxes and you make a bunch of concentric circles like a tube, and then you just take a piece of twine and put it through each of the loops of the cardboard, and then put a palm tree top on top, and you have like collapsible palm trees, and you can turn anything into like palm trees. So we had like, just all this shit, and we needed to have somewhere to put it. And also, Devin and I both were very like kind of socially conscious and wanting to like, we saw a lot of kids getting in trouble around us doing dumb shit. And, we very quickly realized that having something like art or music that you're passionate about keeps you out of trouble. And we were like, man, I wish everybody had something like this. And then Devin's mom is like, she does all kinds of like cool pro-social stuff where she's like, doing charity work and organizing volunteers and stuff all the time. And then my mom was a teacher, and she's like working with a lot of the First Nations people that have had it kind of rough in Canada. And and then even like at the end of her teaching, she was working, like she actively sought out like the the problem kid class in the inner city and stuff and was teaching them. So I was always, you know, kind of raised with a strong sense of giving back and wanting to teach. So Devin and I, we were like, hey, you know, we want to have some kind of a cultural center. And we had this idea of having like a school for the urban arts where we'd have like, you know, graffiti and breakdancing and music production and MCing and like set up a recording studio and have like a, you know, like a kind of cultural center, because there was no YouTube tutorials. There was just nowhere to learn that shit. And, you know, we just saw a lot of people fucking their lives up and doing dumb shit, and we wanted to help. So we ended up getting put in touch with this dude who was a tattoo parlor owner, and he was like kind of a pretty intense dude and like covered in tattoos, and he was like French Canadian and like seemed a little thuggy or whatever. But like a lot of people in the tattoo scene just seem like that, you know. It doesn't necessarily mean the person's like crazy or dangerous or anything, right? And he had a tattoo parlor, and he wanted to throw some like ragers after hours in the tattoo parlor. And he was like, hey, come do ragers at my tattoo parlor. So the first time I did it, we played at this one place, and I remember some local gangsters from my neighborhood who I had beef with, because I was a button pushing freak, that one of them broke into the DJ booth and sucker punched me in the middle of my set. That was not the funnest. And then, because I was a faggot, they wanted to kill me. So there were, all these fucking neighborhood, like thugs waiting at either end of the tattoo parlor. And, we couldn't call the cops because it was an illegal party, and we'd be calling the cops on ourselves. So we just had to like wait it out. And I was just like, oh, fuck this. I hate this shit. These fucking people are idiots. But yeah, I mean, I got beat up a lot for being a fag when I was a kid, and it's good. Toughen me up. Good bit of bullying helps you harden you up for real life, you know? So it was good. I think I got just the right amount.
Slight side note here, because it seems like there's this theme of like self-awareness as you're growing up. It seems like very early on you knew, like, if I wear this thing, I'll get this reaction, or, hey, I see these people around me that are getting into trouble, I want to get them out of that. Do you feel like you just innately had that part of your personality, or do you feel like that was partly like
probably I think early teenage psychedelic use I think contributed to that too, because I was always a bit of like an outsider observer type of person, and then I was always the new kid at school because my folks moved so much. So I never really was like, you know, it's because it's always the people who are like born in a place and they have their 3 best friends or whatever, and then they just never leave their whole life, that fall into these kind of pathological mentalities. If you travel a lot or have a diverse set of friends or a multiracial family, or you take acid a lot, you tend to kind of like not fall into those patterns. But my neighborhood was full of those people, you know, people in a competition to be the most normal or to be the toughest, you know. And because it was a fairly nice neighborhood. It's called the Glebe in Ottawa. It's like a fairly nice neighborhood, you know, because and it was like crazy that there were these kids who like grew up with like totally nice parents, and they just like they would listen to like rap music and shit, but they'd be like, oh, we need to like be tough and hardcore because that's what the musicians that we look up to are like. So they would be like, out of totally nothing to do with necessity, would just like form gangs and beat people up, and like they said they were selling crack. The guy who punched me was selling crack and owned a handgun. And I was just like, why? You live in this like affluent fucking suburb of Ottawa where like all your healthcare is free and your parents buy you everything. Like, why are you selling crack and beating people up for being faggots? Like, what is wrong with you? So anyway, I was you know, kind of I remember after that being like, fuck this, you know, I gotta figure out a better situation than this. And Frank was like, yeah, you know, I'm moving the place, blah 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 blah. Because we ended up hanging out with Frank till late because I was trapped in there. And Frank was like, yeah, you know, I'm moving the place to a new place. We should throw a party at the new place when I move in. We got this big backspace. Maybe you guys could use it for your art collective. So I was like, okay, cool. You know, so 6 months pass or whatever, and we're coming up on Easter, and this was in 1998. And me and my friends decided we were going to throw a 3-day Easter party called Egg Beats at Frank's fucking tattoo parlor after hours, right?
Well, happy anniversary to that one just now.
Yeah, totally. So, so we decided we we're going to do that. We book all of our local DJ friends for like $100 a pop. And we were so disorganized that we like handed people flyers on the way out the first night. Like the first day was totally word of mouth. Like there was just no promotion at all. So me being a fucking high schooler in fucking art class, I was like, I'll just get the biggest dude from my art class to do security. You know, he'll probably do it for like $50. Sweet, you know? So I get him to do security, and fucking place is mobbed in like a second, like line up around the block. I don't know how the whole fucking city heard, but it was mobbed, right? So the place is completely packed and shit's out of control, and we do not have proper security. We have this like big dude who like plays Dungeons and Dragons and shit. Like he's probably never thrown a punch in his life. He's just like a big dude from my art class. He's not even 18. Right? And he's our security guard. So Frank starts getting really fucking stressed out, right? And he's like, thinks people are stealing from him and shit. And then someone does grab the money out of the fucking till. And Frank like thinks it's this other guy and starts doing these crazy axe kicks on the guy, like in front of this lineup full of people coming up the stairs. And the guy's like shoulders, like I heard a crunch. Like it was awful. And Frank's like this huge, like 6.5 foot tall, criminal looking, like terrifying guy, just beats the fuck out of this guy, like beats him bloody in front of all these people. And we're like, Frank, calm the fuck down. Like that guy didn't take the shit. I don't know who did, but it wasn't that guy. Like you just beat up a random patron. Like calm down. And he's like, you want to know why I'm still motherfucking angry? You want to know why I'm still motherfucking angry? He's like, every weekend I have to go into jail, and because I'm only there on the weekend, I'm the fucking mule. You know what a mule is? It means I have to bring drugs up my fucking ass every weekend into jail, and if I don't do it, they'll fuck me up. And now, because I've been doing it every fucking weekend, my asshole is infected, and I have fucking blood and pus coming out of my ass. You want to see? And he drops his pants and has this like huge wad of like bloody gauze and shit on his asshole. And people in the crowd are just like, fuck this, I'm out of here. They just like flip their hands up, and they just like, so we lose like, you know, the first 10, 15 people in line, but there's a million more, so it doesn't matter. So anyway, people just keep coming and coming, and we make all the stolen money back and stuff, and everybody fucking leaves. And I'm like, oh my God, that was day one. That was fucking crazy. Like, what are we going to do? But I was like, we made so much money, like we can get proper security or whatever. So Frank takes me and Devin aside. He's like, hey guys, you know, like I'm sorry I got a little heated back there, but you know, we made the money back. It's okay. And he's like, but you know, these people, I have these people that work at my tattoo parlor, and I feel like they're stealing from me, and I don't know what to do, man. Like, what do you do? And I'm like 16. So I'm like, I don't know, find out who's stealing from you and fire them. You know? So he's like, yeah, I'll do that. I'll do that. So I'm like, okay. Well, that was a weird interaction. Whatever. So the next day I wake up, fucking crack of dawn, get some new vinyl with my money. I was like there when the record store opened on the day the shipment came in. It was fucking dope. But I blow like most of our money on fucking black crack, of course. So I'm like, whatever, we'll make it back. You know, it was gangbusters yesterday. We'll make it back. So then I fucking go in. I got my new records with Devin, and we go into the tattoo parlor. And Frank's like, so I was thinking a lot about what happened. And, you know, you're right. I needed to just fire everybody. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, so I fired my whole staff. This isn't going to be a tattoo parlor anymore. We're just going to throw raves here every weekend. And you two are going to be my main promoters. And I was like, oh God. And he's like, I got to go smuggle drugs into jail up my ass now. I'll see you guys on Sunday. And he fucking leaves. God. And we're like, what have we gotten ourselves into? So we started asking around. Turns out Frank used to be the head of all the Nazis in Ottawa. He was an extreme fucking neo-Nazi racist and ran with all the skinheads until he took lots of acid and decided that he was a dragon and then beat the fuck out of all the Nazis and single-handedly ran the Nazis out of Ottawa and then started running a tattoo parlor. But he's really fucking insane and takes antipsychotic drugs and shit. So I'm like, oh, this sounds like a really dangerous, unstable person. And now they think that we're their is only employees and we have to, so I'm like, fuck. So we throw the other 2 days of the party and we're like, yeah, that's fucking crazy. Let's do this fucking, let's move our art somewhere else. So we needed to find another place to set up our art collective. And there was a bar called Babylon with a big sketchy basement with a leak that you couldn't use for anything because of zoning. And the bar owner was like, hey, even though you guys are underage, as long as you don't actually come to the bar during business hours, we can develop a deal where you guys can have this big sketchy basement for your art studio as long as you keep rotating the art in my club and you do graffiti murals on the front and back on the reg. So we're like, fucking sick. Sounds great. So we move all the stuff out of Sketchy Frank's tattoo parlor and we move it in the basement of Babylon. And on our way out, Frank has these giant styrofoam lemons, and we were doing an event that weekend. And I was like, "Hey, do you think we can borrow these lemons?" And one of Frank's homies was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever, doesn't matter. Yeah, grab them. There's styrofoam lemons. Who cares?" So I'm like, okay, cool, thanks. So we get the styrofoam lemons, and we didn't hear from Frank for a year. We just didn't hear anything from Frank or whatever. And I was scared of the guy, so I didn't want to bring the fucking lemons back. That's I don't want to fucking bring. I just didn't want anything to do with the guy. He's a fucking Nazi psychopath, right? So anyway, so Devin graduates. He goes away to school. I take over the art collective, and I'm doing all these raves and stuff on the weekend. And time passes. And then one day I'm walking around downtown Ottawa, and downtown Ottawa's it's all old because it's one of the first cities. So it's got all these cobblestone streets in the old city and these little fucking stone archways and shit. And that was the main club I used to go to. The Well was near one of these stone archways. So I'm going down, just walking, going to go to the Well. And I smell weed and I see a cherry glowing in the darkness. And I come up and I hear, "Hey, Dylan." And I look up and it's Frank smoking a joint. He's all shadow and he's like, "Hey, do you know what happened to my lemons?" And crucial detail. Crucial detail. I forgot. This is such a part of the story. So we're decorating the World Electronic Music Festival, which is a giant festival thrown by Destiny, which is a big production company in Toronto. They were part of Life Force, which were basically this conglomerate of all the massive rave promoters like Cyrus and Destiny and fucking Life Force and all this shit. They controlled everything, all the big clubs and all the big raves and everything. So we were doing one of their parties, and we were making art for the parties. And one of our friends was like, "Yo, we should make some plaster people, and we can paint them and have plaster people in the woods. It's just cool Easter egg." And he's like, and then someone's like, "Oh yeah, what if we make the people hatching out of eggs?" And we're like, "Sick." They're like, "Well, what do we have around here we can make into eggs?" And my friend Ananda's smoking weed. He sees the styrofoam lemons, and he's like, "Yo, if we saw the ends off those lemons and plaster them up and paint them, we can make some sick eggs." So I'm like, "Brilliant, dude, let's do it. Haven't seen Frank in a year plus. He's not going to care about the lemons. Let's do it." So we turned them into eggs, and they're eggs now. So back to fast forward. So I'm in this alleyway. I see the cherry glowing in the darkness, and there's Frank, and he's like, "Hey, Dylan, do you know what happened to my fucking lemons?" And I didn't know what happened to them. I turned them into motherfucking eggs like an idiot. So I'm like, "No, I don't. And he's like, "Well, I'm going to find who took my fucking lemons, and I'm going to make some lemonade out of them." And I'm like, "Oh, fuck." And my balls, scrunched up into my fucking torso, my asshole clenches. I'm like, "Oh, keep an eye out, Frank." Fucking terrified, right? So a few more months pass. And, I'm just kind of praying it'll go away. I'm fucking 17 at this point. I don't know how to solve this, So my friend Devin comes back, and I had a gig that weekend doing a outdoor festival where he did all kinds of stuff. But these raves, they would end at 10 in the morning, and then I would start taking down right? So it was a full weekend, you know, and I'd have to sit through so much fucking trance. This is why I still hate trance these days. I would have to basically get waterboarded with fucking trance melodies until fucking 6 a.m. to start work after staying up all night working and partying. So it was like, sucked. The teardown sucked. They always sucked. So anyway, I'm getting ready for this party. It's like Thursday, and Devin comes back in from Toronto, and we're fucking hanging out, and we go like, hey, let's go down to our old studio at Babylon. We'll go smoke a joint. And we come downstairs at Babylon. I think DJ Premier was playing, or maybe Mixmaster Mike. It was some really cool like turntablist DJ. They were playing, and we go downstairs, and the people who worked at the bar would sometimes, you know, go downstairs to have sketchy sex or do drugs. And we come down there, and who's sitting there with this like really sketchy promoter guy who used to work there? Who's sitting there talking to Mr. Sketchy Promoter and smoking a joint in our studio? But Frank. Right?
Naturally.
So we're like, oh, okay. Hey, here's Frank. So we come in, and I'm hanging out with Devin. We're trying to catch up, and you know, we're having our separate conversations or whatever, until I hear, "Hey, Dylan." I'm like, oh God. I'm like, what's up, Frank? How's it going, bud? He's like, so do you know what happened to my fucking lemons? And I'm like, no, please don't notice the now eggs on the other side of the studio. There were a lot of things. There was like a giant fucking spider and like robots and shit. There was all kinds of stuff. I'm like, don't notice the eggs. Don't notice the eggs. I'm like, no, I have no idea of what happened to them. And then Frank starts getting a little heated, right? And he's like, man, I fucking know you fucking took that, blah, 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 I'm gonna fuck you up. And then my friend Devin, who was raised like by a granola eating fucking hippie and like went to Nepal when he was a kid and shit. He's like, Frank, you know, it's not good to threaten people. You know, I don't think violence is going to work in this situation. He says, you don't think violence is going to work in this situation? Let me show you something. And he picks up Devin by the fucking neck. And Devin's like 6'4". Frank picks him up, like lifts him up. It takes him to the bathroom. And it was one of those bathrooms with the back of the toilet is up high. You know, it's like separate. And he holds Devin's head against that and punches him in the fucking face, like super hard, fucks him up, drops Devin to the ground. While Devin's on the ground, Frank takes his boots. And then he comes up to me, and I was wearing glasses at the time, so before I got LASIK. He grabs my glasses off my face, and he's like, you're lucky you're so fucking small, because I was like 110 pounds at this point. Like, it wouldn't have even felt good beating the shit out of me. I was a skinny little fucking kid. So he's like, if you ever want to see your boots and glasses again, and if you want to fucking live to see next week, you will be at my fucking tattoo parlor on Monday with motherfucking lemons, or I will murder you. I'm not fucking joking. And then he fucking leaves, and the security like jump him in the middle of this thing, ruins the fucking show for everybody. They fucking security grab him, and Devin's like, I got punched in the face. You got to go up there and fucking promise to get those lemons. I'm just trying to fucking visit. Like, I got fucked up. You got to go talk to him. So I go up there, and Frank's like getting hauled off by security. He's like, you motherfucker! You motherfucker! Like yelling at me. And I'm just like, oh God, I'm going to die. This is how it ends. I'm not going to make 18. Like, this is it. So he leaves, and I'm trying to find anywhere to get styrofoam lemons. I'm like calling around all these fucking stores. No one has styrofoam lemons. And I find in the phone book these artists that are like styrofoam artists. And I'm like, I'll have them make me some lemons. So, I mean, meanwhile, I got like I'm managing a team of 20 people, like doing this fucking art installation and shit. But I'm on the phone the whole time trying to get these lemons. And I call these styrofoam artists, and they're like, you want what? We're artists. If you want fucking lemons, you go down to the arts and crafts store. We only do real art. We don't do fucking lemons for some fucking guy. I'm sorry, you know, like just like all attitude. I'm like, well, fuck you too then. I'm gonna die. So I'm like, what the fuck am I gonna do? And eventually I'm asking people and stuff. I got nothing. I go to the rave, try and get high and forget about it. That works until 10 in the morning, and I gotta wake up and take everything down. So I fucking take everything down, this like horrible fucking illegal party in Quebec, and take everything down, and I get it back into our warehouse at like 4 or 5 p.m., you know, and I'm just like a broken man because like it was like so much work to do the art installation. And then I was like partying my ass off with Devin on Thursday because you better believe we had some drinks after he got punched in the face. So I'm like, on Sunday night, I'm a mess, and I'm like, fuck, I got nothing. I got no lemons, nothing, right? So. And I'm sitting in the basement. People are telling me all these fucking stories about Frank that are not helping at all. Like people are just like, "Oh, I remember the one time Frank kicked this other guy's ass. Oh man, it was so much blood." And I'm just like, "Oh fuck. Like, what am I gonna do?" And I'm like, "Guys, stop telling me these stories. This is literally the worst time you could be telling me these stories. Like, this is not helping at all." So Monday rolls around, and I'm like, "Fuck, I gotta go in there with nothing." Like he's going to kill me and I got to face it. Right. So, I go in there and I go to the Bogey Records. It's the record store that was right next to Frank's, tattoo parlor. And I give them my wallet, my glasses, everything. I'm like, I might be back for these. I hope. If I disappear, it was Frank. And they're like, Jesus, dude, what do you do? I'm like, it's a long story. It's a long story. Unless you have giant styrofoam lemons for me, I don't want to hear about it, right? Oh yeah, I also found out that the lemons were. Oh well, here, I'll continue. So I'm like, okay, so I'm ready to die, and I go into this tattoo place, and Frank is giving a customer a consultation, and he just immediately shoves the book of flash art off the counter, like just shoves it out of the way, and it just falls. And the customers are like, "What?" And Frank goes, "You got a lot of fuck balls coming in here with no fuck lemon." And I'm like, I don't have any lemons, Frank. I don't know what else to tell you. I don't have your lemons. I'm sorry. He's like, come with me. We're going to the back. I'm like, this is it. I'm going to die. This is how I die. This is how I die. So Frank puts his hand on my shoulder and fucking ushers me into the back room. And I'm looking around and there's no employees. There's no one else. Just this big empty warehouse, loud enough to throw a rave without anyone hearing. Like I could scream. No one would know anything. You know, and I'm sitting there and I'm just looking around. I'm like, oh, fuck, here we go. And he goes, you got a lot of fucking balls, man. And he's like, but I respect that. You say you want to figure it out. Let's figure it out. Well, listen, those lemons were really important to me. I would go to tattoo conventions every year and I would put my lemons up high. And that's how people knew you want a good tattoo. You go to Frank, you look for the lemons. Now I can't do that. It's really upsetting. Well, what if someone did that to you? Would you think? I was like, that would be upsetting. And he's like, but you know, you got a lot of fucking, you were ready to die. You don't have your glasses. You're ready to die. I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, because you're not a pussy, how about you make me a big graffiti mural that says tattoo? I was like, dude, no problem. No, that's like well in my wheelhouse. I can totally make that happen. What artist do you want? He was like, so he picks out an artist. I'm like, cool. I will totally make that happen. So I went back and got my shit, and they were like, "What's the story?" I'm like, "I'll tell you later, whatever." And I get my shit, and I just got one of my friends to paint him a tattoo mural, and he apparently liked it so much that he put it above his mantle and never used it at a tattoo show, and he would just smoke weed and like look at it and be like, "Yeah, that thing is sick." And yeah, so that was. Yeah, so that was the kind of shit that I did when I was paying my dues. Because before this, for those of you out there viewing, wondering why the fuck I'm talking about Nazis wanting to kill me about styrofoam lemons, it's because Luke was like, hey, you know, whenever I hear people's bios, they're always like, yeah, so I got a pair of turntables when I was 12, and then my first tour when I was 25 was fantastic, and no one ever talks about what happens in between. So he's like, I want you to tell us about what happened in between. So... Well, Those were some of the many stories.
That was so amazing. Yeah. Oh my God.
I got into some shit when I was a kid.
Well, that was so
all right, so who in the crowd wants to be a DJ now? Show of hands.
I mean, hey, when life gives you lemons, you might get death threats from ex-Nazis who now think they're dragons.
Yeah, but you know, Frank didn't fuck me up, and I totally legitimately never should have boiled those lemons. I never should have turned the fucking shits into eggs, and I never should have lied about it. I fucked up 3 different times. You know, I consider myself lucky to not get a fucking serious beating. Devin got punched in the face. He didn't do shit. You know, so
Someone in the chat, I think it was Sephiros, was like, "This should be a movie," and I couldn't agree more. That was a legit ass movie.
That's just
plot.
one, dog. That's just one.
Oh my god, dude! It was so.
I haven't even told you about the time I almost ended up in Japanese prison. That's a whole other story.
I think that's probably our 2-year anniversary. Is gonna be that story.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to that
basically,
there's definitely lots.
Basically, what Luke was saying is that if this was another producer podcast, they would jump from that story to then I became a touring DJ because of all my experience.
Yeah, that didn't even get us halfway through the dues paying.
I know, but
our crew, we had to do sketchy shit too. I remember we did this rave. I was so sick. It was like fucking February, and the promoters talked us into, because it was in what we learned was a semi-abandoned brothel in Quebec, and they were afraid that bikers were going to break in and steal all the equipment the night before, so they tricked me and my friends into guarding the equipment overnight, and we were just sleeping in this like frozen brothel armed with like saber saws and shit. It was a long night.
Oh my god, dude.
Yeah.
Okay,
we got in lots of trouble. And then there was one time when we were at a rave I was DJing at, and this was before everybody had cell phones. And my friend and his girlfriend were really high on ecstasy, and his girlfriend was maybe 4'11", you know, like tiny, and she took like a whole fat like press pill from Canadian bikers, and so she was high as fuck. You know, she's like 100 pounds if you're lucky, right? So she was destroyed, and my friend Lot didn't know where she was, so he's like mashed off his face. He's like, she's dead in the ravine, I swear to God, you guys have to help me look for her. We're like, okay, we'll drop everything and look for her. So we like organize a search party with all these people, and we're looking for this girl, imagining the fucking worst because we're way out in the woods. And he's like, fuck, okay, I can't do anything. He's like, but Dylan, swear on your life you will find Carrie. Don't stop at anything. Keep looking. Promise me. I'm like, yes, I promise. So he goes off to go fucking do whatever. And we look for like hours, and we're like fucking trying to find her. We can't find her. We go like going around on a fucking 4-wheeler. We board from security. Can't find her. And I'm like, fuck, I have failed in this mission. This is terrible. And my next 3 calls were the boyfriend, the cops, the parents, right? So I go to a payphone and I put a quarter in, and I call the boyfriend, and I'm like, Super Tim, dude, I looked, I couldn't find. He's like, oh shit, yeah, she was waiting at the gate. I picked her up on the way out. I was just like, you motherfucker! Do you remember when I had to swear on my life to fucking find her and drop? I've been looking for like 4 or 5 hours. But yeah, that was raving before cell phones, kids. And you used to have to go to a series of checkpoints so they could make sure you weren't a cop. And so you'd get flyers, and there would be an info line. The info line would tell you checkpoint 1, and you'd go to checkpoint 1, and there'd be like some sketchy looking dude in baggy pants, and he'd be like, yeah, checkpoint 2 is behind the like, donut shop in Vanier. And you'd be like, okay, sick. And then you'd go there, and there'd be another sketchy looking dude and make sure you weren't a cop and tell you where checkpoint 3 was. And the whole thing would be a secret the whole night, because nobody was posting shit on Instagram. So you could actually have parties that were secret. And like they used to have in LA, they would have like 10,000 person illegal raves. And it would stay a secret. Like the cops wouldn't know until the next day or whatever. Yeah, it was wild. Yeah.
The internet in our pockets changed the game there, huh?
There are no more secrets. None. Yeah, there's no more secrets at all. It's all out in the open, which I'm for it. I definitely like. I mean, there's like, you know, I miss when there was a bit more mystery to our artists and stuff. Like, because I mean now, like, you know, you can find out what you got a favorite artist. Well, you want to know what they ate for breakfast? It is fucking like one scroll away. You know, it's like right there. But I like that there's a lot more transparency, and I like that technology is disintermediating the electronic music space. Disintermediating is one of my favorite words. I learned it when I was playing the D3 crypto benefit, and I learned it from a bunch of crypto people. And disintermediate means to get rid of the middleman, but in one word. But I like how technology has disintermediated the music space, and it's definitely like it used to be really hard to get records. You'd have to line up and fight the other DJs for them at 10 in the morning, and then you go to a house party and your records would get stolen. These were real problems. Plus, the shit was heavy. And they would force you to check them on the plane. And I know DJs who would like watch their records come down the baggage belt after being forced to check them, and they'd be coming out like one at a time, and like the insurance the airline's like, oh yeah, we'll pay for them. 25 cents a record should cover it. No one plays those things anymore.
Ugh.
Yeah, dude. You know what's so funny is when we were doing our regular podcast prep, I was just telling these guys like, no, I don't think we need a superhero origin story. Like most people listening probably have seen the ill methodology or whatever, and like
they don't know about Frank and the Lemons.
You don't know about
I did not know about Frank and the Lemons.
You don't know about Frank, dude. All of this has been so fucking amazing. I can't even tell you how glad I am that we've heard all of that. It was so good.
There was a lot of dues paying was done in high school.
Without question. I do want to segue from that into the reason that I originally thought we didn't need your superhero origin story, which was because the genesis of this podcast is actually those details of the nitty gritty, much like you just described, on how you go from being someone who DJs or produces in your bedroom to a professional touring artist. And, like we said, the details that get glossed over. So forward from the DJing shenanigans that are fucking amazing. What are some of the actual turning points for you after starting to produce? And
how I started taking music production seriously, basically through high school, I wanted to get an MPC, so I saved up for like a whole summer, fucking sold weed all summer to my own risk. I had a pager and a bike, just biked around in the heat. And I remember paying for that thing like all in $5s. And the dude was like, really? $5s? I was like, just still spends. Give me the MPC. Come on. And
been a lot of nickel bags, bro.
Yeah, it was a lot. And then I got it home. And it used to be a gram of hydro and a mixtape for $15. That was the deal. That was good. So I was grinding. I was still grinding. But I got my MPC, and I got it home, and I like got a record out, hooked it up, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna sample this. And literally 8 seconds in the recording, it was like, eh. And I'm like, what do you mean? It's like out of memory. And I was like, what? And then I go call the people at the store, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you need to spend another $2,000 so you can get like a 32 meg RAM chip." And I was like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah. Otherwise, you just have 8 seconds." And they're like, "Yeah, just slow the record down or speed the record up when you sample it, and then slow it down in the MPC." I was like, are you fucking kidding? So I was just like, oh, this sucks. So I never finished the beat with fucking 8 seconds of memory, obviously. Like I'd practice finger drumming and stuff, and like I'd finger drum with one hand and play synths with the other hand, but it sucked. It was shit, right? But I thought, having been through the ringer and played like a couple hundred raves throughout high school, that I would be able to go get a booking agent when I came to Toronto. And I moved to Toronto because that was where the music industry was in Canada most. And I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna go to Toronto and I'm gonna make it, And I got my fucking demo tape. I got a resume with this like long list of parties I played and a bunch of flyers. And I went into the biggest booking agency in Toronto, which was also run by Destiny and Life Force. And I figured, they would remember me from when I did the Egg People installation at their World Electronic Music Festival. And I came in with my resume and stuff, and they were like, they remembered me enough to call for the meeting and be like, yeah, sure, I'll take the meeting. Come in on fucking Tuesday or whatever at 4 p.m. So I come in, and I'm like, here's my mixtape, here's my resume, and they were just like, they just laughed. They laughed in my face and then called other people in to come into the room so that they could also laugh at me. And it was because I had no fans and no records out. And they were like, if you don't have records out and you don't have fans, how the fuck are you going to sell tickets? Like, where you think you're going to show them your fucking resume and be like, come to my show. Here's my resume. Like, nobody cares, kid. Go make some records and get some fans, and call me when you got some fans. And I went home like so humiliated and angry, and I was like, I fucking almost died because of those fucking lemons, just to make sure these raving idiots had a good time. This is how I get treated. So I was totally like this entitled brat, and I went home and was all fuming. But then I was like, okay, I'm gonna fucking take this shitty computer that I got to write essays on, and I'm gonna put some pirated software on it and sample my record collection and start chopping shit up until I have like something, you know. And then that was really what lit the fire under my ass to finish tunes, because I was like, all that work that I put in will be for nothing if I can't finish tunes. So it was good old fashioned loss aversion that really did it. It was, you know, I just didn't want all that craziness that I went through in high school to amount to nothing. So that was a big turning point. And then I remember, you know, I'd cut up a bunch of records, like made out of other records, and put them on this website, neptune.xvi, which is like a, you know, producer message board, because it wasn't YouTube or anything back then. And I was doing a record where I needed some scratches for some remix contest that I just never ended up submitting the final track for, because it was a kind of silly remix contest. But I was taking it pretty seriously at the time, and I called up my friend Jay, aka Capital J, who is like a turntablist, drum and bass and jungle DJ from Toronto. He's like pretty well known in Canada in the 90s. And I was getting him to do some cuts on the record, and I had just come back from record shopping because I live way out in the burbs. So when I came downtown, I would go record shopping too. So I just come back from record shopping, and I had a bunch of records, and you know, we were taking a studio break and listening to the records. And one of the records I had bought had a fat skip in it, like right off the jump from buying it at the record store. And I was super pissed off about it because I had just spent $20, and I was living on like $80 food budget a month at that point. Like, I was like, all my student loan money just went to music equipment. And then I was just like, I'm going to see if I spend it all on music equipment right away, then I won't be tempted to spend it later on food or booze. You know, it's great because there's just no way. So I'd like go to the grocery store. I'd be like, give me your biggest bag of flour, you know, and just like, just make everything. So that's like how I learned to cook, was from being poor, and being vegan, you know, because if you're a vegan and you can't cook, you are fucked. So
slices of bread.
Yeah, totally. These potato chips are vegan, right?
Technically.
You know? Yeah. Doesn't mean they're good for you. But yeah, so I was really mad, and Jay was like, "Oh, I know the dude who's the A&R at that record company. I was in a band with him, and the guy's name was The Incredible Melting Man, and Capital J was in a band with him." And I'm like, "What was your band called?" And he's like, "Oh, Genocide." I'm like, "That's the worst fucking band name. You called your band that? Like, you're black. What the fuck?" And he's like, "Yeah, we just thought it would get a rise out of people." I'm like, "It's getting a rise out of me." He's like, "I know, and you're punk as fuck, and you're mad. Think about how mad everyone else got." I'm like, "What the fuck, guys?" And he's like, "Yeah, it didn't go very far." I was like, "Yeah, wonder why, Jay? Your fucking Genocide band." So anyway, when they weren't making weird heavy metal rap turntablism music under the alias Genocide, The Incredible Melting Man was a fantastic house and breaks producer, and was the A&R at a record label called Two Wars of Revolution Records. And Jay had put me in touch with them, and he was like, "Yeah, I'll get you another copy of that record, no problem. So you're working on music with Jay. What's up? Let me check out your tunes." And I directed him to that neptune.xvi site. And then the next time I logged in that site, there was a new direct message from The Incredible Melting Man, and he was like, "Hey, I love this track, this track, this track, and this track." And it was literally like, my first record had too many obvious illegal samples. Like, it was just like a Megamix dub plate, you know, like I used to call them the P record, when you really got a P and you need a record that's like, it sounds like someone DJing for like 10 minutes, and it's just like all mashups and shit for 10 minutes. Those records were really popular in the 90s, where you just like, it would be like a super DJ set made in a computer, but like tons of illegal samples and stuff, and like you could just put it on for 10 minutes. Really good for like breakdance jams and stuff, you know. So I was always making mashups like that for breakdance parties. So my first one was like just like this 11-minute long mashup. So that wasn't something I could put out. But he wanted my second, third, and fourth tracks that I'd ever made, and was like, "Yeah, you got to come to this bar and meet with all these like adults and get a record deal." I was like, I wasn't even old enough to drink yet. So I went in there and I was like, hey guys, yeah, I could totally produce her. And they were like, yeah, you know, like, so they signed us all for album deals. And then after that, everybody's having drinks. I'm like drinking a Coke. And they're all like, oh yeah, what do you use? And I was like, my mom got me a computer to write essays on. And they're like, you don't have a sound card? I'm like, no. They're like, you don't have a MIDI controller? I was like, no. They're like, you don't have any synthesizers? I'm like, no. They're like, do you have any VST plugins? I'm like, I use Sony Acid. What's a VST? And they were like, oh my God, how did you get here? And I was just like, and so they just laid this big trip on me about like all the shit that I totally had no idea about. So it gave me a fucking complex, and what used to be fun, and I was just belting out tracks that were good enough to get me signed. Suddenly everything had to be perfect, and I went through like a year and a half working on one track, and I wanted to kill myself. It was so bad, and like I would just like. And there were times when I would put in like a week of work and it would get worse, you know? And I was just like,
oh yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, what the hell? Like maybe I'm terrible at this. I don't know, you know? And so I got all fucked up about it, and I ended up like, there's this kid at school, I would like, buy his ADD medication and just stay up all night fucking noshing Adderalls and trying to finish it, never getting fucking anywhere. And I just was just further and further down the pit of depression and self-loathing, until my roommate at the time, I was talking to his mom. She called for my roommate, but this was everybody had landlines. I was anti-cell phone. I held out until 2006, I think I got my first telephone. So I was a holdout. But yeah, so she calls the landline and I pick it up, and she's like, hey, is Tim there? I'm like, no, he's not here. You know, we started talking. She's like, how are you? And I was like, I'm hanging on. You know, and she's like, well, what the fuck? I was like, trying to finish this record. I've been trying to finish this record for a year and a half. I don't know if I'm even a music producer. This is terrible. And she's like, you need to check out this book called The Artist's Way. I know a lot of people who that book helped. And holy shit, she was right. So that book was a big turning point. So the record deal was a big turning point, and then that book was a big turning point. And after I read that book and started writing in the mornings and made my contract with myself and all that totally psychologically optimized artist programming shit that has since become an integral part of everything I teach at the dojo, that was what got me out of it. And then I stopped viewing the other artists on the label as competition and started collabing with them instead. And shifting from competition mode to collaboration mode was great. And I got to learn the ropes from guys like Dave Dubb, who released the first ever Canadian breakbeat records, like way back in the 90s on double-sided vinyl. Rob G, who ran Promo Records. So I would make collabs with them, and I put out a whole bunch of vinyl as the Phat Conductor. And I was getting ready to put out my album on Two Wars. But basically the scene in Toronto was fucking drama at the time. And this was like right at the end of the vinyl only era. So all the record labels were freaking out because Napster had just come out, and then also CDJs had just come out. And so all the record labels were like, fuck, we need to stick with what sells. Let's put pressure on artists to make the most boring music they can. And I was being subjected to that, which sucked. That's why I deep sixed the Phat Conductor. I made too many compromises because of the A&Ring I was getting at that record label, which was putting its tail between its legs and not embracing the future. But anyway, so the scene was a closed shop, because also, as another thing that was dying about that era, was the DJs who don't produce. All right. Because it used to be you could just be a DJ and be a scenester. And if you were like a DJ / promoter, you could become a big headlining touring act that was just like a promoter / DJ, you know. And there were big acts that like never got into a studio or produced a record. And they were like, they had agents and were playing shows and selling tickets, and like professional DJs who never produced a record. That was a thing. Right. So there was this dude in Toronto named Demonic, who was, surprise, surprise from that name, a total asshole. And this guy was one of the last. He was one of the last dudes to be a DJ only and not be a music producer. And when I had come into Toronto, I was like wanted to collaborate with everybody and like went up, introduced myself. Like I was not intimidated by the pecking order. I was not, and a lot of the people at that time too. It was like the competition gets the fiercest when the stakes are the smallest. And
I've heard you say that before. That's bars.
It's true, man. And when it's like people would just be at each other's throats over these like gigs for like $50 in drink tickets. And I remember when I was in Ottawa in high school, we started a DJs union of all the staple DJs who played at every party, and we all agreed no one would play for less than $100. That you were a scab if you played for less than $100. And we had a union and we did it. So I come to Toronto and there's all these DJs who are great and they're playing for like $50 in drink tickets and nobody likes their music. And I was like, what the fuck? This is way harder. And Dan was like, he was the big promoter and the gatekeeper. And that company, like Destiny / Life Force, etc., they were kind of like the party mafia. And there were like certain clubs that were on the good list and then other clubs that were not on their list. And if you played one of those other clubs, they would fucking blacklist you. And they would have people that like would go around and take independent promoters flyers down and take their shit out of stores and stuff. And so it was like only the big commercial raves happened. I think I don't know. I don't want to say anything else that'll get me in trouble, but suffice to say, they were fucking mean, and everyone knew it. And they were gatekeeping and mean, and there was other illegal components to their business that you could probably guess at that I'm not going to say. But yeah, they were fucking mean. And this guy Dan Demonic, he was like the main breakbeat guy, and they would have this big club that was like one of those mega clubs where you have like this room is fucking trance and this room is drum and bass, and then there's like a Ninja Tune room and whatever, right? And there would be a breaks room, and Dan was the guy who was in charge of the breaks room, and he was like, he really fancied himself like king of the scene, and he like wrote for this magazine called Tribe magazine that was like our local rave magazine or whatever, and he like refused to review my mixtapes and shit. We kind of got into a little thing where I was always like, because you're supposed to just mail your mixtape in and get reviewed, and he had like since the beginning was like, no, just didn't want to do it, didn't like me, didn't like my fucking button pushing, didn't like my fucking attitude, it's not on board. And then I started putting out records and becoming fairly well known in the city, and he was still like, no, because he remembered the fucking mixtape thing, and he's like, fuck you, punk, and was just not into me at all. So Dan and Rob G, who ran Promo Records, they were best friends. And best friends are really, they were the tightest of friends until a girl came. And this girl, her name was DJ Kick, and she was very cute and a very talented DJ. And Dan and Rob both fancied her. But Rob ended up marrying her and having kids. And Dan did not like that. And so what Dan decided he was going to do was he was going to buy the parent label that all the other labels were part of, which is Two Wars, which is the label that I was on. And he bought Two Wars for $10,000 and stopped distributing Dave's records, stopped distributing Wes the Electrician's records, stopped distributing my records, and stopped distributing Rob G's Promo Records. And he's just sitting on all of our copyright, including my finished album that I was like ready to put out as this contract that I have with the label. And he was just like, yeah, it's at the label's discretion. If we don't think it's a commercially viable product, we're not going to put it out. And I was just like, fuck this fucking guy. I worked for like years on this album, so I was really pissed off. And Dan and Rob had this huge falling out. And Rob, like, he got Promo hooked up independently. But anyway, I ended up producing a bunch with Rob. But I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? Like, how am I going to put this record out? And Dan had been kicked off of our party message board for spamming because he was a promoter, and they wanted you to grease the wheels. If to promote a party, you had to pay. And Dan would be talking about his parties and stuff and not paying, so he got kicked off. And I knew he read that shit every day because he used to be the reviewer for that magazine, and that magazine and the message board were like the center of the scene in Toronto at that point. So I had the genius idea of posting a message board thread where I was like, hey, does anyone know where I could find a good entertainment lawyer? There's this guy who's sitting on all my copyright for my album. Sure would like to put it out for all of you. And then people were like, wow, what an asshole. I'd love to help you. Let me get my friend. And like, I got like all these free lawyers, and Dan's just sitting there like watching the thread banned from the message board, just like fucking seething. And then he calls me up and he's like, fine, you can have your copyright back. Fine. And I was like, oh, fucking thanks. Awesome. Cool. And I deleted the thread, and then I bought him an Apple Store gift certificate so he'd know that there were no hard feelings. And, you know, I bear him no ill will to this day, because he gave me my copyright back. And then I put out my first album as the Phat Conductor on Rob G's label, Promo Records, which became my home as the Phat Conductor, releasing Breaks Vital for a while after that, until about, so that was pretty much from about 2000 to 2005, I was the Phat Conductor. And then I went to my first Burning Man in 2006. And I came home and my computer had been destroyed. Lightning or something had hit our house, and all my hard drives were fried. All the components of my computer were fried. We lived in like a super sketchy low rent apartment in a neighborhood called Kensington Market, which is like kind of the bohemian neighborhood. It used to be like a immigrant neighborhood, and then just kind of got half taken over by like punks and hippies and stuff. And it's like, they have like pedestrian Sundays, and there's like a car with like a tree growing out of it and stuff. It was a really cool neighborhood. But yeah, so I lived there, but the wiring and shit was all like super old. So lightning hit the house and cooked my computer. So I lost my album. I had like a Portishead style kind of down tempo band called the Department of Motion. That album got destroyed. I had a whole bunch of new music as a Phat Conductor. That was all destroyed. And I just like, I came back from Burning Man really, you know, like when I'd been exposed to fans who were like really like they knew my music and were down with like a lot of my weirder shit and weren't like, because like back in Toronto I was getting all this pressure to like follow the rules and make records that are going to sell vinyl and to club DJs and stuff, because all the labels were losing so much money. And I stupidly listened to them when what I should have done was just said, you know what, people are going to buy music that's original, not fucking boring ass music. So what the fuck do you guys know? But I was young. They were like 40. I was 18. So I was like, yeah, I'll do what you say. I'm just happy to be putting out records. So anyway, so I'd come back from Burning Man and I got to play lots more experimental music there and really like get a lot more to the roots of what I was trying to do with my music project. And then I'd seen the Glitch Mob, like before they were the Glitch Mob, back when the Glitch Mob was a crew, and not a band. And I personally I love the Glitch Mob, but I don't really listen to like the Glitch Mob as a band. But all the solo records, like the new Edit record is so great. Crying Over Pros and of course Certified Air Raid Material, like those three Edit records are some of my top records of my whole life. And then all the Uwa and Beretta solo stuff is amazing. But that was back when like Craddy was in the band and Kitty D and Audio Void and Anasia and like all kinds of cats were in the band. So they had like a crew takeover at Nexus Stage on Burn Night. And, Burn Night's was the big party night. And I remember just like tripping out in the desert with all these fucking freaks and flamethrowers and shit. Like just hearing this like new music. Cause before the conventional wisdom that I was getting from like record labels and like all the entire party scene in Canada was that like people don't dance when you drop the BPM below 120 basically, and that was the conventional wisdom. But like up until 2006 when dubstep broke in North America, that was the conventional wisdom. And then so I remember seeing this Glitch Mob set because I loved the Neptunes and like fucking all kinds of shit, and I would try and play like hip hop mixed in with higher BPM music, but it would always fucking clear the dance floor in Toronto or Ottawa because it was like I could do it at breakdance parties. A breakdance event, I'd do it, and people would be like, sick, I'm all about it. And sometimes I would play whole sets of hip hop if I was playing for breakdancers. But the rave scene was not, and the club scene were not open to hip hop. Like it was either, and you never have like a hip hop room at one of those big mega clubs. There'd be maybe a trip hop room or a down tempo room, but never like a hip hop room. So it's like anything that was below 120 BPM was down tempo. And even the name down tempo is kind of a relic from the era when people thought that nobody could dance below 120 BPM because they were all fucking munching fucking disco biscuits because it was the 90s, and yeah, nobody did ketamine in the 90s. But yeah, anyways, so so I remember coming back from that first Burning Man and being like, I really am super stoked to like just say fuck it and play hip hop BPM but with electronic sounds. And then my computer had been destroyed and I'd lost all of my shit, and the only samples that I got back were the ones that I had shared with my friends. That was my original OG cloud backup. And at that point, I was like, I got to share all my best shit. I used to keep it secret, but I was like, all the shit that I kept secret is gone, you know? And then I learned also, and it's aside from data backup, that people really appreciate it when you share your best shit with them. But yeah, so coming back from Burning Man and having all of my work destroyed, that was really when ill.Gates started. And then around the same time, I had, made the first ever commercial Ableton templates. And then that started being a good kind of side hustle. And I was able to like finally start fully supporting myself as a musician. Cause I was a student for a really long time. I was a student until I was like 27, I think. But yeah, really when I got like, once the ill.Gates project started and I had like some residual income from templates and stuff, and my shows had started to pick up, then I really had to go at it. But and even then, like those early years, I did a lot of ghost production and a lot of like one-on-one teaching and stuff. And there's some like pretty established artists that I can't say, but there are some pretty established artists that I was doing production on the down low for, and that was pretty cool because then I got to see like, okay, I might not be getting any fucking royalties from this record, but it's doing well and it's something that I did. So, I have the talent to be able to make records that sell because they're selling for this person. I don't have the team to do it, but I have the talent. So I was like, okay, I'm going to fucking take the plunge. And I remember like I just come back from that first tour and I was studying to be a graphic designer. And I just come back from like, one of my first tours. This was before the Burning Man thing, but one of my first tours, and I'd finally been exposed to people who were like real fans, and they knew my tracks and would ask me about samples in them and stuff. And I was so used to just duking it out with all the other Toronto DJs for like $50 and drink tickets that I was just like, oh my God, I have real fans. Cause there was no social media at that point. Like there's like MySpace, but it wasn't popping, but yeah, so I came back from that tour and I remember my graphic design school, they didn't like me because I was a fucking button pushing freak. So they would assign me the most boring fucking shit that they could, just to be like, we'll beat that creativity out of you. Welcome to the real world where you design tampon boxes for the rest of your life. And they would just try and give me the most punishingly boring shit because I was like so easily bored. And they were like, your challenge is learning to accept boredom and your own defeat as an artist. That's what you need to learn at school. So I got this co-op placement. Yeah, totally. So I got this co-op placement that was like this internship at this fucking wedding magazine called Sposa in Toronto. And it was this like tiny, dirty little, it was like the least glamorous office ever. And it was just like this wedding magazine where every fucking issue is just like frills and lace and 100 bouquets and all this shit. And it's just like this sweaty Bay Street office downtown with like fucking cubicles that were like nicotine stained and shit because we used to be able to smoke back then. It was just fucking nasty. And I had this like horrible old lady boss who was like super convinced that she was like really fashionable, but she was like fashionable in that way that like maybe other people in their like 70s might be into, but like young people were like she's fashionable like the way the Golden Girls are fashionable. Like they're fashionable to some people, but to a lot of other people, you're just like, oh my God, like you're a fucking dinosaur. Why are you in charge of anything to do with style? And so she was really convinced of her own genius and her own sexiness, but she was like this weird like 60, 70-year-old fucking lady who was like one of the Golden Girls, and she's always smoking too. And whenever I would be too creative, like I remember because I was doing image research for them, and I did cool image research. I found these motherfuckers got married in Hawaii underwater, and they had a scuba priest and shit, and the photos were like so sick of this like underwater coral reef wedding. And she was like, we're going for a more traditional look this issue, Dylan. Like, just think like, big Italian wedding, people throwing rice, roses. I'm like, you wonder why you're going out of business. Nobody fucking cares about this shit. But they didn't want.
That sounds like a real parallel to those record labels, huh? Like,
Yeah.
No. Play it safe. Play it safe. Well, the sink is shipping. Well, the ship is sinking.
Yeah, it was brutal. So yeah, I was just constantly being so. And so I remember I was fucking just hating it. I was like, I went through art school and like pushed myself and had this cool art collective and did graffiti and all this challenging shit. And here I am just getting railroaded into just like cutting off all my fucking square edges so I can fit into this round ass hole like everyone else. And I was just like, I can't fucking do this. This is not why I decided to become an artist. This is not why I decided. And I remember like I had this one mushroom trip out at Devin's cottage when we were out in nature, and I was like looking at all these different animals and like the way they survive and stuff. And I was thinking about animals, and I was like, dude, pandas are fucked. Like they can eat one thing, and that thing is bamboo, and they can't even physically eat enough of it to get enough fat for the milk for the baby pandas. And basically, if they weren't so fucking cute, they would have been extinct long ago. Like the only thing keeping these animals going is that they're really fucking cute. That's it. And people decided like, oh, it's just like fucking cows will never go extinct because they're delicious. Like same thing with pigs. They'll never go extinct, And they're just like so maladapted now. Like wild cows. I don't know if they would even know how to cow anymore, but yeah. So I just remember thinking like, man, like pandas are fucked, but raccoons can eat everything. They can just go around eating whatever. And I was like, man, if I'm going to be an artist, I gotta diversify, I gotta diversify my bonds. So, I decided to,
Wu-Tang.
Yeah, straight up Wu-Tang Financial. It's good advice. You get a lot of good advice from Wu-Tang. I don't know if you've checked out.
Protect your neck. Important.
Yes. My favorite person who didn't take that advice was when Steve Aoki broke his neck on a trampoline when he was bouncing on the trampoline instead of DJing, and he was wearing a protect your neck shirt while in a neck brace, and the music just keeps playing. And it's his own video. It's not even someone else's video. And I was like, don't you think like you should have maybe edited out the part where the music's playing, but you're totally not DJing at all? Like, but no, he was like, no, it'll be sweet. I've got a protect your neck shirt on, a broken neck. It's a great video. And nobody cares because it's Steve Aoki. They just roll with it. It's great. It's great. He's honestly, he's awesome. I am a big fan of Steve Aoki. I don't listen to his music, but I like the guy.
Hey,
he's amazing.
Boneless is still my jam. I'm not ever going to step off of that ledge. That's my shit.
He did like a glitch hop tune that's like a Ghost in the Shell remix. That was actually pretty cool for the new Ghost in the Shell movie. I was like, wow, this is actually pretty cool. So yeah, he's got a couple points on the board for sure. But yeah, not really my cup of tea. Again, Unts, Boots and Cats. That is not my vibe.
Not funky enough for ill.Gates.
No. But yeah, so I remember I was working at this wedding magazine and I just got on this tour and like, I was like, okay, I can play it safe and make money the safe, boring way and just like, put my individuality in a box in the closet and close the door on that shit forever. Or I can roll the fucking dice and see if I can have a go at this artist thing. And I knew that like some of my ghost production work had become successful already. So I was like, I know the music can do it, but I gotta, can I do it? Can I put together a team? And then I remembered in grade 10, we had this substance abuse resource teacher named Mr. Sarrazin. And Mr. Sarrazin used to be a junkie, and now he was a phys ed teacher. And he came in to teach us about drugs. And he came in, he was wearing like a Sun Ice tracksuit. And he came in with his like curly white guy hair and like his tan from being outside. He was like, hey kids, let's talk about drugs. Drugs, I loved them. I do them all the time. I really lost my way. I got heavy into drugs. I'd hang out by the train tracks with my friends. We'd do crimes to pay for the drugs. But there were ups and downs. Like, I remember one day where I looked at my hand and I was like, you see that bump in between those two tendons? That's like a spoon. We don't need spoons anymore. Could do drugs right off my hand. Thought I was a genius, but found out that I was really taking a shortcut straight to rock bottom. Ruined my life. Got sick. Hated everything my family left. But then I made a decision one day. I was like, you know what? Not today, Satan. And I turned my life around. And now I'm the picture of health, and I'm a phys ed teacher, and I'm here to talk to you about drugs. And I was like, wow. So the message I'm getting, but probably not supposed to be getting from this, is that you can fuck up really bad and still be totally fine. Like, this guy's teaching phys ed. He's healthy.
They allow him around children.
About his skin. He's hanging out with children. He's admitted to doing crimes. He's admitted to doing all kinds of drugs. He was homeless for a couple of years. He's doing great now. And I was like, you know what? Man, I live in a country with all the second chances. Like, I can fuck up and be fine. It's like whenever I see those, like, you see those GIF images online, and there'll be someone who's like so fat they need to cut a hole in the wall to get them out of the house, and then they'll like start going to the gym and like eating celery and shit, and then you just watch them fucking shrink down to this like Viking, and now they fucking throw tires around and do CrossFit all day and shit. Every time I see one of those, I'm like, that guy was way fatter than me, like way fatter. Like, if he could come back from that, I still got some time before I need to come back from this. You know what I'm saying? So again, probably not the message you're supposed to receive. But I remembered Mr. Saracen, and I remembered, like, you know what? I'm gonna roll the fucking dice. Fuck it. What's the worst that can happen? The worst that can happen is I fail. What happens if I fail? I fucking go back to doing exactly fucking this. Like, it'll be there. If I want to sell my soul and crush my fucking individuality to go work for the man and do what I'm told like a good boy, I can do that whenever. That's always an option. So I was like, fuck it. I'll roll the dice. And I remember I was like at this graveyard because the parks in my house were like, they're fucking sketchy. I was living in a pretty low income, like high density area of Toronto called Jamestown, where there's just like big, like high rises, and just like there'd be like 4 high rises facing each other, and then this like somewhere you could buy drugs, and then you go over and there'd be 4 more high rises facing each other. Like, that was it. That was all that went down there. And like, people would like, you'd like look over your shoulder like someone's gonna take my groceries. Like, it was fun. So I didn't want to hang out in the park. So I would go to the Toronto Necropolis, which was just as close as the park. It was this like big old graveyard from like the fucking 1800s. I remember I was sitting there and I was looking at, like, I was trying to find a place to just like meditate and get my head together. And I was looking at this tombstone that was broken, and there was like a scoop out of it, and there was like a pool of water in the scoop out of it. And like, you couldn't read anything on it or whatever. And I was just sitting there like looking at that pool of water as like my meditation object. And I was like focusing on the reflection and just thinking about like these broken, illegible tombstones where like nobody's fucking visiting these people anymore. Like, nobody cares, their name was said for the last time long ago. And I'm just like, what are they going to put on your fucking tombstone? Like, followed all the rules, was a good boy. It's like, what does it all fucking mean? Like, it all amounts to fucking, it's like, it means what it means to you during your life. And then when you're done, that, your life might mean something to other people, and that's cool, but that doesn't go on forever either. The meaning of your life is what you make of it, and it's the meaning that you create for yourself. Like, sure, there are these like points, like money, and like, yeah, you can go for that kind of a score, but the only thing that makes money is just paper or numbers on a computer screen. The only thing that makes it have value is that we agree that it has value. And there are times that I don't agree money has value. There's times like when I'm paying my bills that I definitely agree that money has value. But when I'm thinking about like what I want to do in my life and like what, how I want to spend my time, like, I think time has inherent value. I think that the value of money is secondary to time, and it is derived from time. And like if you study any of the philosophy of like how natural law extends to property and stuff, it's because it takes time to get property, that the property ownership, even like the concept of owning property even existed. It's like, well, I put in the work for that, therefore that's my shit because I sacrificed my time. So it's the value of time, because people say, well, time is money, but money is time. Money is time. And when and like when you think about like, what would you buy with all the money in the world? It's like, I would buy my own fucking freedom first. So so I remember looking at that broken fucking tombstone and just thinking of all the fucking crazy, just all the crazy shit that had happened, and just like the renegade ass shit we used to do in Ottawa. And then I came to Toronto, it's just like fucking rule followers everywhere, and I was like, man, me and my little crew of like crazy breakdancing graffiti artists, we were doing way cooler shit than these people are doing. I was like, I don't want to fucking duke it out for $50 time slots and fucking drink tickets with a bunch of people like competing to be the best at a genre. I was like, forget about that. Fuck music genres and fuck all that. I'm just going to make the music that I'm going to fucking make. And I'm going to finally make my weird industrial hip hop bass hybrid and just fucking go for it. And shortly after that, I went to Burning Man. That was really when things solidified. So those are all real turning points. But I mean, as you can see, I started DJing when I was 13, and it took me until I was 25 to come up with my forever alias, and I paid my dues and paid my dues and paid my dues and got my ass handed to me and got my ego crushed again and again and again. And, I still fucking loved the music, and I still, like, the beats in my head were still further than where I was, and I had to close that gap. And I was like, whatever, I don't care about anything else except for closing that fucking gap. And, once I made the decision to really give my life to it, that was when everything started lining up, and I think that there's like a real, there's a real power in going all in, and it's definitely not for everybody. And there are people that think that you need to go all in first. And I'm like, no, you don't go all in until like it's an option. Like if you start by going all in, you're going to be bummed. But if after 10 years you still love it, then maybe you should think about going all in, But yeah, after I did that, that was when things started to really come together. And when, when I started releasing my ill.Gates music, I just liked it a lot more. And like that first ill.Gates album still sounds good, but I don't really listen to any of my old Phat Conductor stuff. In fact, I'm pretty embarrassed when people even bring that alias up. But you asked, so yeah, those were the early gears of all a lot of dudes playing. But yeah, those were some of the turning points. And then
wow, that was a great episode, humans. We thank you for tuning into part 1. Next week, we've got part 2. Oh man, I am excited for y'all to hear that part where he gets into more of what is going on currently and in the future of both his career and the Producer Dojo. And there's definitely a few more crazy stories in there too. But tune in next week. Until then, follow us at the Human Music Podcast all over, or at Human Music Pod on Twitter. Make sure to subscribe, like, comment, rate, share, all of those good things to get this good content to a lot more good producers just like you. And until then, make sure you support our sponsors. Dojo TV, where you can watch us and a lot of the other Producer Dojo senseis do classes for free. The weekly download, where you can learn from ill.Gates in his private weekly class for only $20 a month. Insane value. Guest practices, where you can learn those high-level mixing and mastering tips from Seth Drake, the best engineer we know. And Gangaroo Records music distribution, where you can distribute your tunes to all the goons for under $10 a year. All right, humans. Till then, peace and peace among worlds. I like it.